Needless to say, the meta in Brawl Stars right now consists of Rosa, Rosa, and Rosa. So I think it's time we propose some balance changes to fix the meta in Brawl Stars. I got 4 nerfs, a rework, and 5 buffs to do exactly that. Let's get into it. Alright, now let me know what balance changes you most want to see down below, but here are mine that I think would help fix the meta in Brawl Stars. Alright, starting out with the 4 nerfs, and the one brawler that pro players are calling for to get a nerf the most, besides Rosa that is, it's gotta be Jean. Jean in competitive play completely dominates the meta. He's a very well-rounded brawler right now with an insane amount of chip damage ability. Of course, his star power just got a buff recently, so now it's also really solid. But the one thing about Jean that is completely game-breaking is his super. His super has an incredibly long range. It can pull through walls, which is an absolutely overpowered ability. If you need a game-changing moment, all you gotta do is wait for Jean to get his super, and it's not incredibly hard to hit either. If you need that kill, wait for Jean to get his super. All right, get that kill. There you go. You're gonna get it with Jean's super. Incredibly overpowered. So Jean's super definitely needs a nerf. And what I would do, I think, look, one thing you could do is not make it pull through walls. That is definitely one way to fix Jean's super. I think you could do that. The other way you could do it is by reducing the range of it, because right now it does have a really long range, and maybe you can keep it with that overpowered pull through wall ability if the range isn't too long. If you know that, hey, I'm within that range of Jean's super, then you can sort of back off and stay away from it. But right now, it's such a long range, you have no choice. You can't hide at all. Not only does it pull through walls, but it has incredibly long range, so that definitely needs to be nerfed. I'm reducing the range of that by at least a tile. You could go maybe a tile and a half. I'm gonna go with a tile and see how it goes from there. He'll still be a strong brawler, but hopefully he won't be overpowered with this. Another overpowered brawler right now, actually got a nerf last balance change, is Pam. She got a nerf, but she's still easily one of the top 3, if not top 2 brawlers. Well, with Rosa now probably just top 3 in the game. She's still incredibly overpowered. She needs another nerf. I'm giving her a 5% health nerf. I think you gotta keep on bringing that health down, because honestly, she has a star power that gives healing, she has a turret that gives healing, and she has incredibly high health. Dude, like, what does she need? She has good damage. I think that's fine. She doesn't need to be strictly a healer. You can make her deal good damage too, but her health combined with all the healing, way too much. So I think she needs a health nerf. Now, Rosa, of course, she needs a nerf the most by far. So here's my proposed nerf for Rosa. But of course, let me know what you think she should get down below. There's a lot of different ways you could go with a Rosa nerf because she's so freaking strong. Okay, first of all, I think you gotta do a couple different nerfs to Rosa, right? Because it's not just one part of her that's completely overpowered. First of all, I'm actually not going to nerf the amount of damage reduction her super does, but you could definitely go ahead and do that. But the reason why I'm not doing it is because I think that's the one part about Rosa that really makes her unique, and that is why they completely went that route. So I'm gonna nerf basically almost everything else about Rosa besides her damage. First of all, her super charges way too easily. She can just stack super after super after super, and it's just too easily in my opinion. So I think you need to make her super take longer to charge. I'm gonna increase it by 25%. I definitely think it needs an increase. Also, I want to make her super last a shorter period of time. Yeah, it's still gonna have the 80% damage reduction, but instead of lasting 6 seconds, I'm gonna make it last 5 seconds. So not only is it gonna be harder to charge, but it's gonna last not as long. But I'm also gonna give her another nerf, and that's gonna be reducing the amount of health she has. I think this is another way to go about it. I'm gonna reduce her health by about 10%, because this way, she's still gonna be kind of overpowered once she supers, but it's not gonna last as long. It's gonna be harder to charge, and when she doesn't have her super, she's gonna be a lot more balanced and easier to kill. So that way you can sort of bide your time and wait for her to not have that super, but if you're that Rosa, you can still make those plays with her super. I think this makes her a little bit more balanced in my opinion, and gives more opportunities for big plays on either side of the board, either waiting for Rosa to use her super and getting away from it otherwise, or as a Rosa, just knowing you have to have that super to make that big play. Now, this next nerf is not necessarily because this brawler is too strong per se, definitely a really strong brawler, but it's more so because I want to change the meta up. So I'm going to propose a nerf to Brock, because honestly, he's been the best long-range brawler since global release, and it honestly hasn't really been close. Like, there have been some other brawlers, like Rico, on occasional maps where he can have amazing bounce shots, is going to surpass Brock. But other than that, Brock is typically the most well-rounded and overall the best long-range brawler, and he has been for a really long time. So I think you could nerf him, and let's give some other long-range brawlers their time to shine. So what I'm gonna do, I think there's two ways you could go about it. One, you could reduce the explosion radius of his rocket, because honestly, it's pretty freaking big and it's really annoying. You could reduce it by about 25%, I think, and that would be a good nerf to Brock. If you think that's one of the things that makes him more unique from the other long-range brawlers and you don't want to nerf that part about him, okay, fine. Then I think you just have to go with a damage nerf, maybe about a 5% damage nerf. I don't think Brock should get a big nerf, but a slight nerf to at least make other options more viable and at least a better choice than Brock in more cases than not. Because right now, Brock is honestly the best choice in a majority, not all of them, but in a majority of situations for a lot of different maps. Now, there are some other brawlers you could argue that deserve a nerf or at least could change them up because they've been a top brawler for a long time. Brawlers like Barley, brawlers like Spike. Now, you could argue for a nerf for Carl, who hasn't been a top brawler at all for a long time. He's obviously a new brawler, but he is one of the best brawlers right now. I don't really think he should get a nerf. I'm kind of fine with him being this strong right now, but he is one of the top 2 or 3 brawlers of the game right now. So if you want to nerf him, well, that's your prerogative, and okay, fine, you could probably justify it. Now, there is a brawler I really think deserves a rework, who is a pretty good brawler right now, but he's really star power reliant, and I think he's kind of pretty bad without that star power, so I want to make him a little bit easier for free-to-play brawlers or players to use, and that's going to be Daryl. Daryl without his star power, he's kind of pretty dang bad because he completely relies on his super to make strong plays, and his super is so much better with his star power. So without that, he's kind of pretty bad, and that 40% damage reduction matters a lot. So what I would do, make the damage reduction 35% and increase his health by 5%. I think this is a needed thing. I think Daryl, he's a strong brawler, he's a versatile brawler, but honestly, only with that star power. Without it, he's kind of one of the worst brawlers in the game. Not like bottom tier, but he's definitely not strong without that star power. All right, now I got 5 buffs for you, and the first one is going to Dynamite. I think Dynamite, I mean, look, he has his moments, and he's definitely annoying in solo showdown because people like Dynamite's, a group of Dynamites teaming together is easily one of the most annoying things in the game. But even though that's annoying, Dynamite hasn't been a strong brawler for a long time, for a couple months at least. He has his moments, but that's honestly it. He hasn't been one of the worst brawlers, but he really hasn't been good or even like average, I feel like, for a long time. So I think he deserves a buff, and I think the way to do it is increase his reload speed. He has good damage, and I don't think I would change his health. And the other thing, I don't think I would change his super either, or how long it takes to charge. You could potentially change his explosion radius, but I don't think you should do that because I think that's what differentiates him between him and Barley. So I think you gotta increase that reload speed, and I'm gonna increase it by 10% because I think he deserves a really solid buff, and that's the way I would do it. But another brawler I think definitely deserves a buff, who actually got a buff last balance change, but honestly didn't make her that much stronger. It's gonna be Piper. I really liked Piper's buff with the last update. I thought it was the way to go. Increase her super, make it stronger, because that was one of her biggest weaknesses, close range battles. But honestly, it didn't actually make her that much stronger. I was hoping it would make her stronger than it did, and it really didn't happen. So I think she deserves another buff. And the way I would do it is I would increase the minimum damage Piper does at close range, because again, close range is her biggest weakness. And even if you do this, it wouldn't make her honestly that strong probably, but I still think it's needed because she gets completely countered at close range. And even with her super nowadays, her super, it's too random to be consistently good. And unless you're gonna make it a fixed pattern, I think the other thing you have to do is increase her damage at close range. And I think you gotta increase it by about 10% with her normal shot. That's what I would do. It's not honestly a big buff for Piper, but she definitely deserves a buff in my opinion. The next brawler, and again, this also goes with my increasing the options for different long-range brawlers, right? Piper, I think, should deserve a buff for part of that reason. I'm also gonna propose a buff to another long-range brawler, Colt. Colt hasn't been that bad. I feel like he's been an average brawler for a long time. He's been decent at a lot of things. He really hasn't been great at that much, but he also hasn't really been horrible at that much. But I think he deserves a buff. I want to make some more long-range options viable. So I would give a buff to his reload speed by 5%. I think this is where you would go with Colt. I wouldn't increase his damage. He has good damage. I wouldn't increase it or change his super at all. I think that's fine as it is. So I think, and I also would increase his health. I think that's fine too. So I would go with a reload speed buff for Colt. The other thing you could do is make his star power stronger. Now, last time his star power was faster, Colt was one of the best brawlers in the game because movement speed for a long-range brawler can be overpowered. So that, look, I don't think he would be overpowered in this situation if you gave a buff to his star power. So you could do it and maybe he would be fine and that would make him strong but not overpowered. But I really think you should probably go with a reload speed buff because I think that's probably the better way to do it. And a high skill Colt could really be strong, but if you're not very good with Colt, it still won't work that well for you. And I think that's the way to go about it. The next brawler I want to give a buff to is Poco. Poco got a buff to his super, which I really liked in the last balance changes. But again, it didn't really make him that much stronger. It's a hard thing to always find value with. So I think he deserves another buff, and I'm giving him a damage buff because let's be real, that is his biggest weakness. It is his damage. In a one-on-one fight, he hardly does any damage at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's the lowest damage in the game in a one-on-one fight. Now, of course, he's better in hitting multiple people, but a lot of times, unless you're really low trophies, doesn't happen that often. So I think you got to give him like a 6 to 8% damage buff. Nothing crazy, but a small buff that would make him just more viable. I don't think it would make him a top brawler in any regard, but it would probably make him maybe above average. It's going to depend. Poco is one of those brawlers that's very team comp reliant, so playing with randoms a lot of times doesn't always result in success. So I think Poco deserves a buff, and damage, in my opinion, biggest weakness, so give it a buff. Next brawler I think deserves a buff. It's gonna be Shelly. She actually got a buff last balance change, but again, all these brawlers that got buffs really didn't get that much stronger. Shelly she's not exactly a counter to Rosa, but well, there's not very many brawlers that counter Rosa, and Shelly is probably in the top 5, maybe. But look, Shelly also charges Rosa's super, and that's the OP part about Rosa, so it's kind of a give and take. She can chain supers off Rosa, but they don't do that much damage. So I think Shelly deserves a buff, and I'm gonna increase that reload speed by 5%. Last time she got a range increase, and I was hoping that would make her better, but it didn't do that much because she almost does no damage at long range. So I'm gonna increase her reload speed. I don't think I'd change her damage or her super. The other thing you could do is try and increase the amount of damage she does at long range. I'm a little bit afraid though of doing this because if Shelly starts to consistently do good damage at long range, she's going to be incredibly annoying. Now at the moment, her damage at long range is very weak, so you could probably get away with increasing the damage she does at long range and it wouldn't be too toxic. That's the other potential way to buff Shelly. Now there's two other brawlers I think you could argue to give a buff to, and I would be okay with it, and that's Frank and Tara. Both of these brawlers have not been that great for a long time. I mean, Tara had some moments for sure, and she has some game modes where she can be really strong in. Frank as well in Brawl Ball, but overall across the board, both of these brawlers aren't that great. They're kind of weak. Tara you could probably give a health buff to. Frank I think deserves a star power increase, make that last a little bit longer. But I'm not gonna give them buffs in this balance change. I only want to give 5, and I think those other 5 I mentioned deserve it more. Check out other great ways to improve Brawl Stars right over there. That's gonna be it for today's video though. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later.